So I mean, I hope that's like sustainable for them. I don't know if it is, but it'd be cool if it was because I'd like to see this team continue to upset expectations.
And hey, if this whole NACL thing doesn't work out, Dragoon might make a fortune on brain rot meme edits of League of Legends clips. I don't know if he's the one who made that that response to Winnie, but that video is just peak League of
At the
Legends
very least,
content
it
right
was
there.
good.
It was definitely good.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Salt Mine. This is Season 2, Episode 5, or Season 3, Episode 5, actually, as we've been going split by split. We're following Euphoria rules, and this is the second time we've
Okay.
recorded this intro because we were missing audio, and yet I still didn't check if this is actually Episode 5. I think it's Episode 5, so we're going to roll with that. Gordo here. I'm joined by TDS and Slayer, and we're going to do a little bit of a mid-season spectacular. Just to get everybody up to speed, we've just crossed over the week 4 mark, which is halfway through the season in terms of time elapsed. It is 21 matches completed, 24 matches to go, so a little bit less than half match count wise. But figure we get everybody up to speed before NACL is going to take over the LCS time slot for this upcoming weekend, maybe get some new eyes on the league. I am hearing rumors that LCS is going to be doing something. Who knows what that is? Definitely the place to be is going to be NACL to check out how all of these teams are doing. So figure we'll give some thoughts on all the teams. We'll catch up on. We were off last week. We had the Normology interview the week before that. So it's been a while since we've had like a normal just chatting about NACL episode. So this is as good of a chance as any to get caught up and chat about where all these teams are. First thing I do want to talk about is this weird schedule. Like, I made a rant tweet about it the other day, so I want to get your guys' input on it and just chat about it in this circumstance a little bit. Mirage Alliance has played 6 matches. Teams like Cincinnati Fear and AoE have played 3 matches each. I have no idea how we got this desynced, like how teams are playing this wide of a variety of different games. Like, I get that it can't be the same amount of matches every week. I get that you want to take over the LCS time slot during the break. I get that there's some weekends where it's going to be Fridays as well because you don't want to go too late for the Eastern time zone people. I get that 45 doesn't divide evenly into 8 weeks. There's got to be some differences in the schedule. That I'm willing to forgive. But why are all the teams playing such different amounts of matches? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I really don't know. Sorry, I remembered when we did the recording the first time. TDS spoke first off of that toss, so I didn't want to pull a Slayer
Right.
again here.
It happens.
The only thing I would say is obviously it's an obvious scheduling issue, but where the problems could arise is like you're talking about a team like Fear and AoE are now going to play a bunch going into the end
Yep.
of the season here. And for teams like at least Fear, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about AoE later a bit more where they're at, but teams like Fear, I certainly expect to be in the playoffs. So that now becomes a team that is probably very polished, either very polished or on a very bad skid going into the playoffs, and they'll at least have a lot more game experience going into those matchups versus a team like potentially Mirage, who would play so many far less games, and then it's kind of like the same debate people have around sports where it's like you win, you get the first round bye, you look kind of rusty in your first game because the team before you played an extra playoff match. So you could run into those problems, and that could be something we see later on. And well, easily was avoidable if we scheduled a bit better because yeah, 0-5 versus 1-1 makes zero sense no matter how you try and slice it up.
Yeah, there's no realistic reason why that would happen. Like talking about it, right? The fact that there's the discrepancy is more than 3 games for some of the teams even before the scheduling this week. The fact that you couldn't just make it at the very least one difference per game. Like I understand if it's difficult to fit everything into schedule, like you were mentioning, it's 45 matches into 8 weeks. Okay, you can get we can get behind that, but try and make it so that the difference is no more than 1 game, maybe two if it's really difficult, maybe 2, but 1 game makes it easier to try and keep variance as minimum as possible because going into a week 8, right? There's going to be the potential for some of the teams to only be playing what 2 matches. I think Fear Mirage Alliance plays 3 matches going into the last few weeks, whereas Fear is going to play 6 matches. So now we reach a scenario where Fear has everything left to play for to try and put themselves into a good spot in the for playoffs, and then Mirage Alliance has barely anything to play off for. Yes, they still can qualify technically or get out of the, or more importantly, get out of the relegation zone. But first few weeks are known to be places where some teams struggle to try and get something out of their team, right? Like they struggle to find identity, they struggle to find ways to play around their team, they struggle to find even communication avenues for themselves. And they develop that going into the later weeks. So Fear now has a technical advantage because they've been able to work more than some of their teams and played less matches, and now they will be playing the more important part of the season with a much more cohesive team compared to Mirage Alliance. And even if the playoff implication and relegation implication are still alive to a certain degree, and it makes excitement good, it's not fair for teams to have this sort of discrepancy, especially when it's known that initial weeks are different for a lot of teams.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that I forgot to bring up. I don't know how, we'll see later, but the amount of stage games, since we're playing live patches here in North America,
Yep.
the teams playing towards the end of the season potentially will have a lot more time on a certain patch that might change the game versus one of these other teams, which just kind of compounds on what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And
That
that's
also
one of
goes for
those
playoffs,
things.
right? I'm just quickly to know because playoffs may change. The last patch before playoffs may be the playoffs patch completely, just because
Yep.
of some changes. That means that a team that plays the last patch before playoffs and is able to play more matches in that patch will have a leeway, a better understanding and a better leeway going into playoffs as well.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one of those things that is like really stands out to me as well. Is like I was starting to think maybe the schedule's so weird because they're trying to balance it and make sure that everybody like plays a near equal amount on each patch. That's not the case at all. Like there's teams that didn't play on 14-1 at all. I think there's teams that won't play because it'll be 14-5 in week 8. Are there teams that don't play at all in week 8? I think there are.
I could check
I
really
could be
quick.
wrong. It's possible that everybody plays week 8. It's possible that they set up the schedule that way. In which case, props to
Mm,
you guys.
Uh,
Actually, Supernova plays
it
matches and
does.
FLYC plays too, so no.
Yeah.
There's teams
Well,
that don't
Supernova
play
plays
last
2,
week.
FlyC plays 2, but there's 6 total matches, so that's 12 total
Yeah.
competitors. So the fact that Supernova and Fly play twice doesn't mean the other 8 still all play at least once each.
But
I think.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah. So I think everybody plays week 8. So they
Yeah,
at least did
everyone
that.
plays last week.
Yeah, everybody plays week 8. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That avoids
Week 7
giving,
and 8, actually.
that avoids giving anybody an extra week of prep for playoffs. That's probably the right call.
Yeah.
But I do think, and that schedule discussion I think is as good a point as any to jump into our first team here. I would like our first team to be Mirage Alliance because I think this is a team that, listen, we're not Mirage Alliance fanboys here. I'm not gonna. I know we had Norm on the show, and I was a fan of them preseason with their original roster. This doesn't mean that they hold undue influence over me, but I do think they kind of got the short end of the stick here, right? In
Without a
regards
doubt.
to the fact
Yeah.
that they made, and it's their own fault that they made roster changes 2 days before the season started, right? That's something that was
True.
very controllable. But as a team that made roster changes 2 days before the split started, having to have such a front-loaded schedule is really tough for them. Like they had to play,
Yep.
their season's freaking over. Like they're 1-5. They have 3 matches left to go. One of those is against Fly Challengers, so might as well be 1-6. I'm sorry, they're not going to beat Fly Challengers.
Well,
So it's like,
I was gonna say really quickly, their Mavs versus Fly Challengers is the last regular season series
Yes.
of the entire year. So
Yeah.
if you want to pull the little shenanigans, Fly might have a locked up spot. We'll see, but yeah, your point still stands.
Maybe, but I mean, like, I don't know though, because single round robin, we've talked about this before. Like the match record and is going to be so close, and Fly
True.
Challengers is already dropping random Mickey Mouse games, best of ones for no reason. So like, I don't know,
True.
like every win matters. I don't know. We'll see what like Maryville looks like and stuff, but it wouldn't surprise me if Fly still have something to play for in the last match.
It's a lot more likely than previous splits.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, maybe, but I don't know. It's assuming that that's the case and that Fly are going to try in their final match and aren't going to limit test too hard. Like MA might as well already be 1-6. They're gonna end somewhere between 1-8 and 3-6, and that may not be enough to get them out of relegation. Like it's a tough position for them, having had such a slow start to it. They just got their first win last week, over
AOE.
over AOE,
AOE.
who we will talk about later. But yeah, for me,
Yep.
like I think Mirage Alliance are kind of in like need to be in like Band-Aid mode. They need to figure out
Yep.
what it is that is the closest thing to working for them and like have it ready for a very possible relegation tournament. And if they turn it around and they make playoffs, that's great for them, but I think you got to start thinking about like, hey, how do we hold on to this spot against the promotion teams?
And that's the thing, like thinking about potential roster changes, right? And I'm talking for everything that has happened with Mirage Alliance, both before, at this point, and maybe later. Roster changes can be like it always depends on what you're bringing that changes the dynamic of the team, right? And one big example of a positive change that changed the dynamic for great success came in the form of last split, right? Where AG got Surdy, got Armeo, and they just immediately ramped up, completely changed the dynamic of the EG Challengers team, and were able to turn around the situation. And that change came around, I think it was around week 6, so they still had 4 more weeks of play before they could actually qualify. But that's the thing, around that timing where when you make roster changes, you still had you were playing 2 or I think it was 1 or 2 matches per week, right? So you still had more leeway to actually be able to get more cohesiveness with the team and try and ramp up. The issue with Mirage Alliance is that roster changes coming in 2 days before. They play 5 games in the first 3 weeks. That means that already your ramping time is completely out of place. You're out of position because you don't have a ramping time. You don't have the same situation as EG Challengers where you can just take step by step, and each week you get progressively better. No, you made a roster change, you have to play 5 games immediately, and guess what? If the roster doesn't click at the second, that means you're 0-5. And that's what happened to Mirage Alliance. Without taking into account the fact that I think they made the wrong roster changes, because I don't think it was Prismal. I think it was just I think you just stay with Scooped and then play with Dardock and Will. But that's another discussion. The fact that they made the roster changes, but the schedule affects them in this way, makes it really difficult for the ramping up to happen. Now, that may mean that for the relegation tournament, this team will have clicked and they can look way better than they are looking now.
They'll certainly have that option, right?
Yep.
I'm trying to play in my head like devil's advocate for sneaking into a playoff spot at the end, like Gordo was talking about. I mean, it'd be really obviously, it's probably not going to happen, but their remaining series are going to be against teams that I just are like a lot hungrier. Like we already talked about, they'll play FLYC at the end, who will likely still be playing for something, but I don't want to talk too much about their other 2 remaining opponents, because I'm sure we'll have lengthy discussions on both of these rosters. But
Yep.
Let's just say they're playing 2 teams that had much higher expectations and are on DEFCON 1 with where they've been so far through the split. TLC and Disguised are the 2 teams they'll be playing, and those 2 rosters are going to need those wins a lot more than Mirage will. So it's not like they're going to be getting any sort of easy sort of opponents or matchups here. It's rough. They play Disguised, TLC, and FLYC to finish their split. If we were talking about that at the end of last summer, we would have said they're going 0-3. So
Yeah, I think on the bright side, I do think their series against AOE showed some promise. I think they are starting to kind of find what may potentially work for them. I really liked the Silas game for RJS. I thought he came up pretty big in, and then they did the Jace Brand comp in game 3 that they also were able to like play super aggressive, really snowball, really get ahead, and just absolutely slam the game that way. I don't know if that's going to be exactly what they stick with, but I think that could be like an identity, trying to go for the carry junglers with Will, who we know can be very aggressive and is very individually talented, and then RJS has been performing well as well. Some team communication issues here and there aside, where he's been kind of on a different page than everybody else. And then, Prismal. I mean, TDS alluded to it earlier. Prismal has been rough. Prismal's had a tough run of it so far. I think the bot lane, both of their laning has been rough, and then the mid game and late game, like Prismal's been getting caught a lot. Perhaps that's part of the reason they've given him so many Ezreal games.
Yeah.
They've really started to lean in. Like, that Ezreal is still, I think, a big pick for them. Was one of the champs they won on this past week. They've started giving him stuff like the Ziggs and the Senna to maybe try to change things up a little bit more. I think that might be a good idea moving forward. So we'll see. It is interesting, by the way, that he's piloting the Senna now, because they were way back at the beginning of the season. It was like Prismal, Yasuo, Dardoch, Senna. So now seems like some kind of change has occurred there. Or maybe it just depends on the matchup.
If you ask me, it made more sense to give Dardoch the one that pulls off the wacky stuff, the different champions instead of Prismal, but that's a different discussion. I will say though, quickly, because I was checking the schedule, the greatest thing for Mirage Alliance is that, technically speaking, the opponents they will be facing are all direct opponents. When you look at standings, right? Standing wise, it's TLC, DSG, and then FLYC. Ignore them. Like, it's TLC and DSG. Those are two victories that, with the way that both of these teams are currently, I can actually see Mirage Alliance being able to take those two. And even if playoffs is something that you are not reaching to try and get the farthest possible, as long as you beat those two teams, you're already putting yourself in a spot where maybe you can secure a safety net. And I think that's what Mirage Alliance should be looking for, because I'm also a believer that FLYC probably doesn't want to reveal anything big going into playoffs, especially with the last matchup being Mirage Alliance. So it doesn't matter as much for them as it would for Mirage Alliance. And I think that can make a difference as well.
So,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Slayer, if you got anything else.
I was just going to add to the Prismal Dardoch discussion, because, another champion that I think he looked relatively good on was actually the Jhin in the final game against AoE, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about with support Dardoch. What I thought it was always going to be the most successful was putting him on those kind of blind engaged champions. The problem was, a lot of the times you put him on those engaged champions, you saw, like you talked about, Prismal would dive too far forward with him, get caught a lot. But with the Jhin and the Leona, he could just sit 1,500 pixels back and fire curtain calls and, affect the team with CC. The problem with, this idea of let's give Prismal something really long range, let's give Dardoch something you can go crazy with, is there's a lot of ways to counter those types of bot lanes. So it works really well in a game 3 where you've already limited a lot of the champ pool of AoE, and you can now punish with that range. And like you talked about, the brand is really fed, so nobody can even walk up. Like, if you try to walk up near a comp with a brand, you're just going to get blown up. So it works in the vacuum. It looked good in that vacuum. I'm curious to see how they can adapt to it, because teams are not going to let them get away with. You don't get away with Leona Jhin very often in this meta.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to use that as a jumping off point to talk about Team Liquid challengers a little bit here. Guess we're going top to bottom, or bottom to top rather. I actually kind of disagree with that. They're appear here. I think the thing about both TLC and Disguised, which we were talking about just a second ago, is they're at 1 win and X losses. DSG's at 1-3, TLC is at 1-4. But I do think their schedules were very front loaded, and I think they have an easier run of it back here. And I guess it's kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Is that neither of them have played Mirage Alliance yet. Neither of them have played Lit yet either, who I think have exceeded expectations, but a lot of folks had pegged as a lower rated team coming into the season, and who have really grabbed their wins. Their wins have been against Mirage and against Wildcards. So, I mean, the Lit wins have been against other teams that we had pretty low rated coming into the season as well. So I actually am expecting, I'm coming in with the default assumption, who knows how they'll do against some of the other teams, like Fear. Who knows how they'll do against Fear, right? Fear is a team that has barely played. But looking at teams like Mirage Alliance and Lit, I am going to be predicting DSG and TLC to be able to take those games. And so I'm expecting them to rise up, and I'm expecting teams like Lit and Wildcard to fall down, and for those to end up being the teams that Mirage Alliance is like actually competing with to try to avoid relegation. AoE might be in that category too. Hard to tell because they have also only played 3 matches.
Yeah, technically could be. I'm more like looking at it as well with TLC. So I can see them being able to turn around the situation. I don't think their players are really that bad, and there's some moments where they've shown connection. I think one of the biggest things I'm looking at as well, think because of the scheduling, is the fact that TLC already won against DSG as well. So in case there's like not horrible situations scenarios, right? But like in case of a head-to-head, already TLC has the advantage over DSG. So I can see that being an impactful matter if they go into the last week needing to get an advantage over DSG or having to compete for that relegation spot. I can see TLC having that edge over DSG being important. Then on the other part, even if I think and I agree, TLC had a lot of their strong opponents coming in at the start of it, they've also lost against AoE. And I think that loss against AoE kind of makes it a point that TLC are either really middle of the pack or they simply cannot connect with each other. And another issue that I find with them is that I don't think Romer is a strong mid laner in the current NACL. And that's a big worrying trend because if you don't have a strong mid laner, you're more than likely not going to win a lot of games.
Yeah, I think they're just solo lane. Jenkins has looked rough at points too. I think their solo lanes. It's not to pat myself on the back here from the primer, but I think right now we're seeing if you don't have good solo lanes, you're struggling a lot in the current state of the NACL. I think I kind of lean towards TLC bouncing back some because I think it is kind of like a communicate. In those first couple of weeks, we saw like Keel and Romer, like they were just not on the same page, going for dives at any point. It seemed like like 2 different voices were probably going in those columns or some of those later game calls as well. And that was a similar situation that was happening to their LCS team a year ago, or not a year ago, a bit of time ago. Before obviously APA helped turn that around, but I think with time and an org that you trust like TL, communication issues and shot calling issues can be fixed. And if I had to pick one of the the teams that we've been disappointed by most to turn it around, I think TLC is the team to pick. With the one caveat being, like TDS said, we need to see Romer perform better for it to work out because your communication ability can only take you so far.
I do think like
just a quick thing, by the way. Sorry, Gordo. Just a quick thing. I realized also this is the first split post Spawn, right? Like this is the first time TLC has not had Spawn as a head coach.
yeah,
For
he's head coach
for
of
the
the main
split.
roster. They have Mash
Yeah.
now as their coach.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious how much like not only how much Spawn had an impact. Obviously, he's been great for TLC because he's made a champion and being able to turn around a lot of the situations. But it also brings the question of was his Spawn really one of the main things that like turn around a lot of the weird situations for TLC? And if that's the case, if Mash doesn't replicate that, are they going to falter more consistently? That's also another question because the coaching staff change may be more meaningful than we think with TLC.
Yeah. I mean, I do also think, like, it's so hard to tell because they've changed out so many pieces that it's like, is this just a rendition of the team that doesn't work out? Because even under Spawn, right, there's been versions of TLC that haven't quite worked out. While we're talking about, like, TLC and DSG a little bit in the same breath, I do almost have... I think I have a different read than you guys on TLC in that, like, I think Romer individually has actually been quite good. Like, his laning stats are very good.
Okay.
He's ahead at 15 usually. Especially against like when they played against Supernova this past week. Like I think he took Shochi to town. I think he was like really, really good up against Shochi in the majority of that matchup, even though Supernova ends up winning at the end of the day. I think it's the mid jungle like synergy that's been like way off. There's been so many games where like Romer and Keel are just so clearly on like totally different pages. Like I remember calling out after week 1, like their matchups up against Fly Challengers, it felt like a lot of that was like Romer would be on the opposite side of the map and they wouldn't be able to get the TP done in time. Like, I wonder, I don't know how good Romer's English is, but I wonder if that's like a contributing factor here is, maybe he's just not quite able to communicate with his teammates as effectively as he will be later down the line. This has got to be like most of like it's definitely Keel's first time playing with a foreign language teammate, I would think. So you got to think there might be an adjustment period there. Like I said, they have an easier back half of their schedule. They haven't played Mirage yet. They haven't played Lit yet. I think they will take those wins, and I think they will end up climbing up a little bit.
They already screamed the team that you don't want to face in the playoffs, because they're probably gonna be the lower seeded, and just not a matchup that you were expecting.
They're probably doomed to now. Yeah, I mean they can't do better than 5-4, so like they won't be up on the top of the table. DSG as well, I think like kind of in that same boat, in that they were hyped coming in. They are 1-3, so not quite as bad as 1-4, but still losing a lot early on. This is a team where I do feel like the solo lanes have kind of been like a bit of an issue. Like I feel like Perry is so used to like having Shochi winning in mid, or at least getting pushed in mid and moving around the map and being able to do stuff like that. And then Philip and Faisal were both that for him in the top lane as well during the Cincinnati Fear era. I feel like Young has just not been very proactive. He hasn't been bad, but he's been picking, a lot of melee assassins and stuff, and he hasn't really been making a lot happen individually. And then, like, Tenacity, I think, has not... Like, I think this team was built, like, assuming Tenacity would just slam every top lane, and I do not think that is what has happened for the most part. I think, like, his Casante's been fine, his Aatrox has been rough, and then, like, when he's not playing Casante or Aatrox, he's playing, like, these weird carry picks that it feels like only he is playing, and they are not working out very well either.
No.
And just quickly, just like talking about DSG, right? Tenacity can falter. Young can falter. The problem that having two soul laners that falter is when you don't have the third one that can come up for them. And I think that is one of the biggest issues that this DSG roster had. And I'll be honest, it crossed my mind, but I didn't think it was going to be that impactful because I thought Young, Perry, and Tenacity were going to be able to overcome pretty much the fact that their bot laner was a clean AD carry. Like, I have nothing against Minui, but he's not a hyper carry. You don't build a team around Minui. You build the team, and then you add Minui on top of that. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that when your soul lanes falter, you need to have someone that can actually carry or become the carry for the team. And the problem is that because it's so consistent that we see Young and Tenacity falter, then Minio is not going to go above his job. Like, he's a great AD carry doing his job, don't get me wrong. I think that he's one of the better cleanup AD carries in the NACL. The issue is that if you in this spot had someone like Sayed or Rockboom, that in my eyes are better hyper carries, I can see DSG being able to achieve more victories. Maybe they would be more middle of the pack, but at the very least, they would have someone that you can put the team on his back, and he can carry the team. That's not Minui. And I feel like that's one of the biggest issues that DSG had. Not saying that he's been playing bad, but simply that he doesn't go or do the hyper carrying that Tenacity or Young were probably expected to do. And that's the part that DSG is faltering with, in my eyes.
Yeah, and then, just to kind of compound on this, with Gordo's point, is you then look to Perry, but because you have Tenacity picking, like, these picks like either Fiora or Aatrox, or he's going to play like Casante's maybe the closest he's getting to real like tank utility duty right now.
Darius and Yone and stuff.
Yeah. So he's never picking utility, and then you've got Young who's slamming those melee assassins most of the time, and in mid there's not a ton of ways to play utility right now in the current meta in my mind. You're now pigeonholing Perry to play utility where it's like, yeah, he can be effective early on, on some of these like utility jungle picks, like, your Sejuani's and such, those types. But everyone knows, a Fed Sejuani is only as good as her solo lanes are doing. So when your solo lanes they're picking these carry picks are faltering, you can't do much on that utility jungle pick at all, and it just really just starts compounding those issues.
He's playing a lot of Vi, and I think it's the same thing, right? Is like,
Yeah, that's like 2 single target damage. Your utility there to try and find somebody, but even Vi, like unless you're playing solo queue like fun lethality smurfing, you can one shot somebody. You're playing Vi to lock them down. You're not playing Vi to kill
Yeah,
anybody.
it's more so the follow up, and I do agree. Like even though he's playing Xinjiao, I would love to see him being able to play once the Lee Sin that a lot of people have seen him being able to play, right? One of those champions that feel more. Yes, the risk is higher, but I'd be willing at this stage with DSG. I'd be willing to put more risk onto Perry being able to carry than onto either Tenacity or Young. Not saying that they can't, but at the very least, you need to try and find ways to secure playoffs. And if it's already being proven or it hasn't worked that your solo laners can carry, put Perry in more of these points where he can be the hyper carry. You can just go for tenacity, play a bit of tank duty. Yes, he doesn't like it. We know that from 100 Thieves days, but
Yeah.
you need to reach playoffs. Like the problem is that if you don't reach playoffs, that's the big issue here. And I don't want DSG to disappear because I like the arc, but bias aside, or not disappear. I don't want DSG to be relegated because I like the arc. But bias aside, they need to find one method that works out for them to consistently get victories and play through that to secure playoffs because they have the players to be able to achieve it. Like their player value is one of the highest in the NACL. The problem is that they don't have a cohesive way of playing that can consistently get them victories.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
and-
wonder if some of that is like, they have Inero as the coach now, and you would think Inero as like as kind of a big systems guy, right? As like a guy
Yeah.
who's got that LCS experience, who like probably wants a team that can play the standard game most effectively and isn't the kind of guy that wants to like be leaning on these pocket picks and stuff. And I think you see that in Manui the most, right? Is we have not seen the Manui picks this season. We have not seen the Seraphine, we've not really seen the
Vygar.
Ziggs.
Yeah.
Like he played some Vygar last year. We did not get to see that. Like he has not been playing these like mage kind of picks. And the traditional AD carry, the only traditional AD carry I really associate with Minui is the Aphelios. And he has gotten to play that. I mean, half their wins have been with him on the Aphelios, half
Yep.
being one. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. Like I feel like this. I get that that's kind of an arrow, right? An arrow probably wants them to like play a more standard game, but like at some point you got to be worried about your employer getting relegated, and
Yep.
need to defend that slot, buddy.
Well, the thing is too, for like Manui's sake, is you can't use the crutch of, oh, this is a meta where you've really got to be playing traditional AD carries. No, you could slamming Seraphine, farming
You do kind
Seraphine
of have to be
bodies.
playing Varus though.
Well, yeah, some of it, but what I'm trying to say is like Seraphine, right?
Yeah.
Like slamming Seraphine and like farming Seraphine bot is very good right now. I think. I mean, if you play, if you,
Seraphine Senna, right?
yeah, you can play Seraphine Senna easily. So I think Seraphine's very, very good right now, is what I'm trying to say. So like, why not throw him on those picks? And then the unfortunate thing, like a conversation that we might have to start having is back to TDS's small point, like the 100 Thieves issue with Tenacity was, oh, okay, he can't really play tanks in the LCS. Let's have him go boot camp and then he'll go play NACL. Surely he can play tanks in NACL, right? If he can't play tanks in NACL, then wow, there's gonna be a
that's
lot
a
more
worry.
problems for Tenacity, as in his career, not just disguised.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this in the preseason. Like the top lane pool is so strong that like
That too.
it's hard to stand out. Like I think there's stuff to love about most of the top laners in this league and like how good they've been able to be. And yeah, I think like Tenacity is one of the ones that has stood out the least out of, like
Yep.
Jenkins has had some awesome games. I think Alorum's been really good on Mirage Alliance. Like, Quacker's
Quacker.
had his good
One of the
Quacker
more salvageable
performances.
points.
Like Niles has been great. Like
Dragoon
Dragoon's
had his
been really
moments.
good. Like he's been standing out on like his unique picks, like the Mordekaiser. Like they've all been very big. There's not a top laner in this league that I don't have at least some good stuff to say about. Yeah, so I mean, and it's just Tenacity is one of the ones I have the least good stuff to say about. He's just not been able to show up in this very competitive environment.
Is he the worst of laner for you, like compared to the rest? At this point at their least, right? Like at this point, is he the worst? 'Cause
Hard
I
to
can actually
call,
see an
'cause
argument for him.
like
I think Zamudo might be the only other one I would say, to be honest.
Zamudo and
Yeah.
Quacker have both oscillated between like having really awesome games and having really shitty games. And Zamudo is on a 1-to-2 ratio of those. He had 2 games where he looked
Yeah.
really good, where they were beating TL, and then I think he's looked bad all the rest. And then like Quacker, like game to game, will alternate between like demolishing Surdy in the 1-on-1 and getting
And then
demolished by
getting-
Surdy in the 1-on-1.
Yeah.
So it's
But
like they're
that
like
variant
they're
list is
inconsistent.
better,
I think
right?
if I had to pick, like if I had to go 1 to 10 for the season so far, I would have Zamudo at the bottom. But that is always going to have that rider that we've seen so few games out of Zamudo.
Yeah.
But then again,
Yeah,
I mean, we've
that's fair.
seen 8 games out of Zamudo. We've seen 9 games out of Tenacity. So, there's could be more. Disguise has played less than half of a season as well already.
Yeah, they still have more time to find some ways for Tenacity to turn around, right? Like, but I like the expectation was higher, and certainly I want to see a bit more from Tenacity. That being said, I can also understand if he's coming back to pro play has made it a bit more difficult for him to, or maybe the realization that wasn't going to be the stumpiest top laner in the league has affected his confidence. Could be a case of that, and if
Maybe.
that's the
Yeah.
case, then it's a bit more difficult to tackle on the first split back. But at the same time, like once again, if PSG gets relegated, there's no chance for you to turn around that narrative. So you need to put up some performances at this point at the very least.
Yep, I think so too. But yeah, I mean, like to TDS's point, like I think Tenacity's definitely in the bottom half. There's no way he's in the top half of
Yeah.
top laners.
He
And that's-
can't be.
He can't be. There's way too many good top laners. Like Surdy clearly has to be in there. Niles has
Niles
to be
is
in there.
having such a good split.
Niles
honestly.
is so. Niles is
It's
like
insane.
if Surdy weren't here, Niles would be the best top in the league. Like I think Surdy's hard number 1.
Yep.
I think Niles is hard number 2. Like Niles he's just so aware of his role at all times. But this is as good a chance as any. We can jump all around the standings if we want. Let's talk a little bit about our top teams. Let's talk about like Fly and Maryville.
I hate so much. Or what team are we gonna talk about? Just in case. So I
Let's
can
dive
save up
deeper into Maryville just while I'm complimenting Niles.
Okay, perfect. I hate so much that they decided to keep the roster last minute. Like the 2 changes are a difference between 8th and top 3 for me. Like those 2 changes really make the biggest difference for me in what Maryville was able to accomplish. Like Judy and Spyrax were already top 3 NACL prospects last split. So having them on your team that had good players, but I think they were lacking in the individual like player performance now makes it so that you have strong individual players and strong team dynamics. So they were just going to be a top team with the way that they had the idea. And I'm just mad that they decided not to show this before I made my power rankings.
Here's the thing, though, and I do know the obvious response to this. Arguably, the best lanes for Maryville has been Niles, like you guys talked to the top lane, and I don't know what the hell got into Zyko and Scary Jerry. They're playing phenomenally as well, and on picks, I don't know, man. They're smashing lanes that, yeah, like on our power rankings, we've been like, dude, this is a wash. Like I don't know how they're matching up for some of these. So the obvious caveat that I'm sure one of you would have said is, yeah, when you have Yuji and Spyrax, the other lanes are going to get heightened a bit compared to what they would have had before. But I don't know, man. I thought Zyko was arguably had one of the roughest, if not the most rough, summer split of any player. And
Yeah.
now he looks like, I don't know what's
He's a
gotten
top
to those
support
guys.
in the league.
He's a top support in the league right now.
He is.
And it's
I want to defend Scary Jerry though, because I do think that last split he was already putting himself on the top echelon of
Yeah.
AD carries. Like he's
was.
a great AD carry for Maribel, and I think he was for me he was the best part out of Maribel last year. More so than their team cohesion,
100%.
he was the best part. So you add to that better players around him, I think he can shine even more, and he's doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was.
my point is Zyko, by the way. That Zyko is the one that is
Yeah.
in that bottom lane. It surprises me the most.
I agree. Like I think Scary Jerry is the one that like is standing out, but I agree that I think he was like kind of always super good. And is definitely showing up like a little bit more right now. And I think Zyko's the one who's really evolved into a new player this split. Like a
Yep.
question that I've been asking myself a lot is like, and maybe it's too early to tell, right? We're only 10 games in. They're 8-2, but Fly Challengers last split was 24-12, so 66% win rate. Now they're 8-2, 80% win rate. Obviously higher now. Why do I feel like this like Maryville team is more standout and good to me than Fly Challengers was last split, when they're both like these UG Spyrax teams, and it feels like it should be pound for pound like that Fly Challengers team with Faisal and Masu, who's now killing it in LCS, by the way, and Winsome. Why were they underwhelming compared to this Maryville team that feels like it should have pound for pound worse players? I think that difference is Zyko. Like that's it on top of like I think the competition's a little bit weaker.
It's also expectation based too.
Yeah, I think the expectation makes it.
But I mean, they're also just straight up like winning a higher percentage of games than Fly did.
True.
Yeah, like they're also like straight up undefeated in series play. But yeah, like I think so. I think some of it's weakness of competition, but I think a lot of it's how good Zyko's been as well. And yeah, I mean, this guy's just like totally different. I think it was RMC I was talking to kind of gave this take that like this is the first time. What really put Scary Jerry on the map was he led Converse University to a deeper CLOL run than anybody anticipated them making. And he was having these crazy highlight reel, like Ezreal plays and stuff. Like that was what made me aware of Scary Jerry, and I think that's what like really put him on the map. And then he got recruited to Maryville from there, and that became the strongest edition of Maryville University that ended up qualifying for the NACL. But since he's joined Maryville, he hasn't been like that big pop-off standout player. And I do really wonder if it's actually a support difference, because Zyko used to be much weaker relative to the competition, I felt. And when he was popping off on Converse like that, he had Rox908 as his support, who's like a really who's like a really notable, like good amateur support, was picked up for the Evil Geniuses Combine, stuff like that. Like he's on people's radars, even though he's not an
NACL.
Rock. He played on TSM Challengers a little bit last year. Is where people may know him.
But, he was there actually as a replacement.
He'll probably get another shot eventually. He's very good. But yeah, I just wonder, like, I think it might be a little bit support driven there. And I think now that Zyko's kind of not just showing up more, but like legitimately looking like one of the best supports in the league, that's just like unleashed Scary Jerry to be like totally nuts. Like he's been so good. And yeah, I mean, I'm really hyped to see where this Maryville roster can go. Because I mean, like Niles is also like unprecedented good right now. Like I don't know what got into Niles. Since last season. I think he looks way better this season. He's just so acutely aware of his job in every fight, in every engagement, in every game. Like, what really stands out to me, I don't know why it stands out to me so much, but there was what was that game? He was playing Gnar against, who did they play this week?
Was it Supernova?
Yeah, I think so. No, it must have
Supernova?
been...
No, it was...
DSG. It was against DSG. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it must have been against DSG. I think it was. And like Array.
It could have been Mirage.
It could have been, but I think it was DSG. And I think it was Array who was like really strong in this fight, and Niles just like full sends it on the Gnar, is like diving so deep into the enemy team, like 1 versus 5, like clearly sacrificing himself to be able to get the AD down. And I think he just like, it's just situations like that. He's just playing so well. He's so aware of the fact that he could just like full send it, sacrifice himself to accomplish what needs to happen in the game. It's just it's been so impressive to me. He's just he's been really good. It's been really good. Yeah, it was
I think
it was disguised. It was against Manui's Smolder, I believe.
Okay.
Smolder.
I think the best way to put like Maryville comparatively, I think I would make the same analogy I made for DSG, but the opposite. Where DSG has the issue that their team revolves around their solo laners being able to hyper carry, and they have utility based bottling that is able to be really good around them and try and put the resources around the rest of the members. For Maryville, Niles is doing that job. And when you have Yuji and Scary Jerry doing the really well done of carrying the team in a hyper carry manner, then his job is just to find the appropriate timings to facilitate for that. Like you're saying in that fight, he sacrifices himself, but he's facilitating Scary Jerry and
it was to kill Young's Fed LeBlanc, by the way. I found the match history, and now I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, like the idea there, right? It stays the same. Like his job is not to be the shining star. It's to facilitate for Scary Jerry and Juji to get everything going in the team fight. And that works perfectly well because both of those players are performing really, really well. So when you have those two players performing well, and then Niles just need to not int away anything or play to facilitate for them, it just makes Mirabel be a really cohesive unit. And one of the things that I congratulated a lot from Maryville last split was their team fighting was one of the best in the league. The problem is that it was way too linear and predictable that it got pretty easy to discover the longer the split went. Now they still have a really good team fighting power, but they have players that make it harder to predict because they can play at a higher level mechanically. And that makes the team even scarier because now team fighting wise, you have to be on your toes every time. And you have to have someone like FLYC to be able to go against that player-wise and cohesion-wise.
Definitely.
Yeah. The last point I'd like to make on Maryville, which I find very intriguing doing my research, is last year talking about UG, I think some of his best performances for DSG came on or excuse me, FLYC. Yeah. Fly Challengers came, he was like the guy who was playing like really good utility Ivern games, like really setting up his lanes well. And he was playing, really good Maokai games. He had some great Sejuani games. And then you look this year, right? And you go down, he's played, what is this?
2 games of Jax, 2 games 10? Of Kindred.
Yeah. That was my point.
Talia, some Graves.
He's played a ton of these carry junglers.
Yep.
And looks like arguably better. Or well, I don't want to say arguably better because they're two very different types of jungle styles. But he's playing them like up to the level of potentially the best carry jungler in the league right now. And all it really tells me is if this guy doesn't have LCS offers, how many junglers can we even think of in NACL recently that have shown across in a year span, like a time of a year, that they can play that many types of junglers really well? Like it's insane to me that he's played. The metas have changed a bit. Obviously, this is a whole different game. Everyone likes to say it's League of Legends 2 with Season 14, but I don't know, man. The fact that in a year I've seen him dominate a game, setting up his lanes on Ivern so many times for FLYC, and then come over here and just deleting people with his Viego, his Jax in the jungle too. You don't find there are LCS junglers right now that don't have the range of that. Now the caveat there is they're playing against way higher competition, but my point still stands. I think.
Yeah, his status as an import is always going to be his hardest hurdle to overcome.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I hope he gets a shot eventually. Let's talk real quick about Fly Challengers. I mean, it's so hard to even like come up with anything unique to say about this team. They're so good from top to bottom. Yeah, I mean, Surdy is what was promised. He was really sick, I believe, in the series up against Cincinnati Fear. That was the 111 Rumble game, 112 Rumble game.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, he has been near immaculate. And I guess he did lose to Quacker that one game as well. That they dropped to wild card. But I think all in all, he's been very, very reliable. He's been very, very good for this team. Shaden gets a little hyphy sometimes, but he's been quite good as well. I think Quad is perhaps best individual player in NACL.
He's won them games.
Yeah, and I mean, and that top side is just so cracked that it's like, Sejed feels like he barely even needs to do anything. Like, I think he is very good. I think he got to show it a little bit this week. There's one fight against Wildcard where he's on Vayne, and he solos out Aaron Smolder in like such a crucial moment. That was awesome. But that's like the first and only time Sejed's had to do anything this whole season.
But funnily enough, I think, and this is probably my hot take for this couple of weeks, I think Syed is probably if not the best, second best player of FLYC in my eyes.
You think so?
Like for me, I think the impact that Syed has on the game, it's not Masu-esque, but compared to the previous splits for FLYC, but I think it's on track for that because he's as a hyper carry great, but the impact that he brings to the team, I feel like, is not talked about enough because it feels like he never loses. Like he's not a guy that you can take advantage of, and I feel like it does bring up so many things for FLYC that makes it really difficult. Like Shading can have hypey moments, Surdy can have the 114 Rumble game. Syed will never have that, and then he has the potential to hyper carry the game for you because he can be a hyper carry. So I think Quad is a fair enough number one, but I'm willing to argue Syed is a number one for me from FLYC just because of his impact to the team. It feels like, and the fact that he's essentially a rookie, a true rookie in this team, and he's delivering like that.
I guess I'll pump the brakes a bit on that take. I do distinctly remember in that wildcard game, Sajed, or wildcard series, it was game 2. He was playing Ashe, and they even made it a point on the broadcast that he was whiffing arrows. So he had a rough game too.
They give up 4 kills level 1 in that game because he doesn't volley the bush before they face check it.
Yeah, that was level 1 shenanigans
Okay,
too.
fair enough.
Those are rookie moments, is what I was gonna say, right? Like that's like that was like, this is like everyone in sports. Everyone goes like, what was your welcome to the league moment? That's probably Sajid's welcome to the NACL game right there.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, I also want to point out, you guys probably thought I was gonna do this. He does have Chime as his support, so like he has the best support in my mind to make sure to help him out and support him the best. I think Chime is the unsung hero, but I would still put Surdy and Quad above Sajed. I like the take.
Okay,
mainly, the one thing in my head is even in that game Gordo pointed out, which I was going to bring up that fight and nobody did because that was an insane fighting mechanic to even find Aaron in the jungle too. Like they were fighting a red buff.
He's like in the middle of 4 people and he's like dodging skills and avoiding CC to just keep hitting Aaron. It's crazy.
Yeah, but what really won that game? It was a fight later where Surdy's Cassante gets a 4-man knockback that just completely was it? I think it was
all 5. I think it was all 5.
I thought it was 4.
I remember it's all 5. I could be wrong.
That was the game-winning play.
I think it's 4. Yeah, I'm more on the 4 side as well. Thinking
I was double checking the VOD earlier.
We'll find the clip after we record.
My point is like even in that Sajed amazing moment, which was the game-saving play, what was the game-winning play? It was Surdy again. That Cassante was nuts. It also was Dark Wings. I think Joshy pointed out Dark Wings whiffs a shockwave, and that was basically the game. He whiffed the shockwave right after that, and that kind of ruined it for wildcard. But
everyone has their moments.
I also just this entire debate is kind of for fun because in reality, all these guys are just playing like lights out. Like I don't like pitting them against each other for who's doing best because can we really pick one guy outside of a flu game from Surdy up top that they're really looking like we didn't expect them to?
The issue is the scoreline, right? Like the 111 thing does impact you a bit, but I agree. Like FLYC has the correct players, and as long as they don't like massively underperform, they're just simply so good as a team that it's kind of difficult to see. And going back to the point, I think Quad has delivered in the way that not maybe everyone expected, but in the same vein, everyone was worried after what happened with Quid. So the fact that Quad has been playing really well, it's a good sign, and I'm excited to keep on seeing Quad. Like, once again, yes, they have Jensen in LCS, and I think Jensen shouldn't be replaced just yet because I think he's doing great. But having the alternative to have Quad, who's in a great level as well, and then go up, it's such a comfortable spot to be in as FLYC. Because you have a backup in case something goes wrong in that position, which is great to have in almost every time. Same for top lane as well, by the way. Like you have top lane, bot lane, top lane, support, and mid lane. In case something goes horribly wrong in the LCS, you have 3 great players that could just slide in immediately and can be a positive factor.
Completely agree. We were talking about wildcard there a little bit. We can pivot over to wildcard. They started off hot, 2-0. They've lost 3 series in a row since then. Been at the center of some trash talk conversations. How are we feeling about wildcard?
I'm feeling pretty great. I think they've landed exactly where I put them at the start of the season. Okay. I do want to point out, I know it's been a while since I've been on it was a couple weeks since I've been on the broadcast, but I did say after wildcard went on that like 2-week sprint of being at the top of the league that I was like, I'm not going to victory lap it. And then what happens? They kind of do end up faltering. So So they're exactly where I thought they were going to be, right? I felt like they got a little bit disrespected. They got to show why in the early weeks, and now they've faltered a bit. They've had some question. It's kind of just to me that they were playing teams where what we talked about, they had scrappy win games. Like they kind of threw some leads. Like they started playing teams where it's like you're not going to get away with that. Like against FLYC, like you're not going to get away with that. That game also their one game is like Gordo mentioned. Is that a game win? Who knows what the game looks like if Saja just volleys a bush or if Saja hits like half of the arrows he's missing in that game. That game probably might not even be a wild card win.
And I want to follow on that. I'm going to jump on that point because for me, wildcard is in the spot where I don't feel anything about them. Like, it's not Maryville level where their expectations were here and then they immediately jumped up. And it's not DSG level where they were here and my expectations went down really quickly. Like, wildcard is where wildcard should be in my eyes, following on Slayer. There's nothing out of the ordinary. I think their place on the way that they've been playing should put them around this spot. I feel like, and I agree with the idea that they've been disrespected, but at the same time, I do think their initial play was, I don't want to say fluky, but their wins weren't convincing enough for me to say that they were going to be a top contender.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I can still see them being a middle of the pack. I can see them contesting for top 4 to a certain degree. I can see them being there, maybe, but I feel like 6-5 is where I would put them. Because I don't think they're worse than this, but I don't think they are better than this. And I don't see them taking out any of the top contenders that simply the upside for these contenders are going to be much higher than what Wildcard appears to be to me. Even if I think Darkwings is probably one of the best players in the league, even with the whip and all that, I still think Darkwings is one of the best players of the league. The problem is that I think it's mainly Darkwings, and then the rest have to follow up on that. And I'm not sure if that's enough to go over FLYC, go over Maryville that has so much power right now, go over Supernova that they are one weird team, but they have everything to just spike at the right time as well. And I don't think Wildcard has the power to go over it.
Surely somebody on this podcast put them 5th, and TDS just said they'd probably be 5th. Surely. I'm just
yep.
Surely a different community NACL podcast didn't have their community rank them 10. Surely that didn't.
That
doesn't happen around here.
I still think they'll end up sinking down a little bit. They still have not yet played Maryville. They have not yet played Supernova. I think those are going to be some pretty rough matchups. And then we'll see. Like, it's hard. They haven't played AoE or Fear yet either, and that's going to be tough because barely anyone's played AoE or Fear yet either. So I don't know. Hard to predict what that outcome's going to be, right? Like, Fear definitely looked pretty good. AoE looked kind of rough, but it's hard to tell with such a limited sample size. Like, is that really going to be the case moving forward? But Maryville and Supernova definitely going to be tough for them. So we'll see. I think there's definitely still space for Wildcard to sink decently low. There's also space for them to kind of restabilize, win some matches, and stay middle of the pack. So we'll have to see what the future holds for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not going to cash in my wild card bet until I know it's gonna ring out. So
nice.
No celebratoriness from me just yet.
Let's move on to the other big rising team, which is Lit. Lit's managed to get themselves a couple of wins here. They were rated by many to be very, very low. I think they're showing up. I think they're giving a better fight than I think a lot of people were expecting. They took Cincy Fear to 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, and definitely have caused a little bit of conversation at the very least.
I mean, they're just the most fun team in the league. We could get really into why they are. We don't have to get really why they are, but I think they're the most fun team in the league right now for not just how they play on Summoner's Rift.
Okay, per. I also do like the team dynamic. I don't think they're the most fun just because I have one more favorite, but I do agree they are top right there, and they have players that I'm excited to keep on seeing. Like, I don't think we're going to get more chances with Lead, particularly because I do think that Lead may be one of those relegation bound teams if they are not careful enough. But they're doing a good enough job already, right? Like, winning, being 2-2, 50%, 50% is a good way to start your NACL experience. And then if you're able to go over expectations and keep yourself in playoffs, that's already a great advantage. Once again, I'm really excited to keep on seeing Rockboom and messages, particularly because I'm a huge carry guy, and I like to see carries being able to get more and more chances. So excited to see how they are going to keep on doing. The problem is that I feel like they may be a kind of, I don't know if this makes sense, but a gasoline requiring team. And I'm not sure if that makes sense, but like they had a lot at the start, but I feel like the longer it goes, the less gasoline they will have. And it's going to be difficult for them to keep that level up. At the very least, in my eyes, with the NACL. The only advantage is that they still have quite a bit to play for, which makes it so that as long as they don't horribly crash, 5 games is enough to try and put yourself over the line, which could be the biggest advantage they have over someone like maybe DSG that has, I think, less games.
Or Mirage.
Or okay, no. So DSG does have the same games.
Is
TLC has less games, and Mirage has way less games. So yeah, at the very least, above them, they have better chances just because they do have more games.
Yeah.
I will say they really quickly. Sorry, Gordo. They have the roughest end of season schedule.
They do.
I think of any team.
Yeah. I was going to say a similar flavor of the same thing, which is that their wins are against Mirage and Wildcard. So how replicatable will that success be remains to be seen a little bit. Yeah, you know, they've got some tough matchups coming up. They haven't played Fly, they haven't played Maryville. They have played Supernova, but they're going to have some tougher matches. Disguised is another one of those. Like, will they, won't they? Will Disguised be able to take them down and move up? That's what I think. But if they're able to, you know, keep beating up on Disguised the same way everyone else has been beating up on Disguised, well, then that bumps them up. Now you're in like the 3-win, 4-win territory, and you can really like consider yourself pretty safe from relegation. So we'll have to see. My standout players are totally different than TDS's, though. I've been pretty impressed with Kisno. I think like that Kisno Kindred game that he got to win their series against Wildcard was absolutely massive and led to some trash talk as well. And yeah, like I think
best trash talk in ACL history. Please, let's make sure that's correct.
Okay. And like I think Dragoons like Pocket Mordekaiser and stuff have been absolutely massive for them as well. Like that dude is just so aware of the power of that champ. And yeah, I don't know, it reminds me like I think it was like 2018, 2019-ish Team Liquid where Impact was just slamming Mordekaiser every game and was like, yeah, just gank me and I'm gonna ult one of you. Like it's, you know, it's fun when that champ's good. I think it's got a very interesting niche, and Dragoon is the only one really abusing it. So I mean, I hope that's like sustainable for them. I don't know if it is, but it'd be cool if it was, because I'd like to see this team continue to upset expectations.
And hey, if this whole NACL thing doesn't work out, Dragoon might make a fortune on brain rot meme edits of League of Legends clips. I don't know if he's the one who made that that response to Winnie, but that video is just peak League of Legends.
At the very least, it was good.
It was definitely good. Also, I just to, you know, as keep in mind, I'm a hard stuck like Emerald, a mid tier League of Legends player, but I do play a lot of Mordekaiser, and I do know that the Fiora matchup is annoying as hell, and he made it look way easy up against Quacker, I believe. So and he smacked Quacker around with that Mordekaiser. So that was or was it Quack? Was it Quacker? Somebody's Fiora got slapped up by Dragoon. And Fiora can do is actually pretty good at countering Mordekaiser in my mind.
It was Phillips Fiora.
Oh, okay. You know,
he did also play it against Quacker, but it was against Quacker's Cassante.
Yeah, and a Fiora though, so I guess we kind of
still Fiora. Yeah, it was Phillips Fiora, so actually not a bad like.
I think I respect Phillips Fiora more than Quacker's Fiora. So.
I don't think Quacker plays Fiora. So.
Yeah. So yeah, got to give him the props there. We've been talking around him a lot. Let's chat about Supernova here a little bit. Sitting at 3-1, looking very solid, fresh off a win with TLC. I feel like this is like other than Fly Challengers, of course, this is the other like one of our big, highly rated early season teams that is actually like delivered. Like I think they're coming together very well. I think Kenvi Shochi have been a very, very strong mid jungle duo, and I think they've been able to like carry that through to a lot of success. I also think Diamond is having a pretty good season.
He's kind of just the rock of that roster.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was like the pro. I feel like Diamond sadly exists in that limbo where he's really good for NACL, but not good enough for LCS. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest problems that he's going to face almost every time, because he can be top NACL support every time, but he just doesn't cross the barrier for LCS to just stay there. And to a certain degree, it's kind of sad, but he also can deliver when it comes into NACL situations.
Yeah.
And Supernova, for me, I would say, and it's kind of weird to say it like this at this point, where we've seen what they are able to accomplish on the side of FlyC. But my favorites to win it all are Supernova. In reality, just because
Ooh.
I do think like power wise, I feel like they have a really good core to try and go face to face in terms of player value. But above that, like you're mentioning, they are coming together. And one of the big things that they have over other teams is that I feel like their flexibility compared to other teams, something that not a lot of teams can try and go against. Like there's a lot of players that can try and play around certain things that other teams maybe not have that deep flexibility, and maybe one of their biggest advantage. Also, the fact that I think that they are a streaky team, so if they can get a really good streak going into playoffs, I can see them just running over a lot of the people.
I actually really like that take from you, TDS, because I think Supernova are one of the better teams. Might even be like second best team when it comes to I trust the most in big games because of their roster. I mean, you've got guys like Kenvi, Diamond, like you already mentioned, Array. These are all guys who spent some time in or around an LCS team, so they could be like kind of like real veteran, like kind of the rocks of that roster to hold them through into playoff runs. So I really like that take that you could see them winning it. I think the one thing I want to say with Supernova, besides the obvious things, is we came into the split with a couple of guys who were, instead of playing NACL last summer, they subbed on LCS teams. And some guys were in limbo. I think we've kind of gotten it, at least so far in this split, proven that that's kind of a good choice. Because I think Array's looked really good. Jenkins, has had his moments. I agree with Gordo that he's not the most of the issue with TLC. And then if we want to even pull like an LCS example, XU's been very good in the LCS in my mind. So it's good to see that choice hasn't scorned a lot of these guys as they come back to playing in a competitive scene.
Yeah. Important to keep in mind for guys like Tomio too, who are now in that same position on the
Yep.
sub position. I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's about most of what we can really say about Supernova. I think they look really good. I hope they keep it up. I want to see a little bit more. Like, Shochi has, I think, given the strength of the rest of the roster, I've been a little disappointed in Shochi so far. Maybe he'll turn it up later in the season, but I think he struggled a lot up against Roamer. That's for sure. In just this last series, when they played up against Maryville, I felt like he struggled against Spyrax. Yeah, so I don't know. I'd like to see, I thought he was like a solid number 2 last split behind Young. I would like to see him get back to that kind of territory and be like, a real contender for promotion. And I think if he keeps up what he's shown in the first 4 weeks, I do not think he will be, regardless of how highly Supernova end up placing. But we'll see. He's still got the innovative picks. I loved that he busted out the ADTF. We're all going to be sick to death of ADTF. Like, we're going to not even believe that I'm saying this in, like, 3 weeks when that champ is, like, fully embraced and everybody's playing it all the time. But for right now, it's a cool, novel pick that he's on a little bit early. So I'm going to give him props
everyone's
for
sleeping
it now.
on TF. Everyone's sleeping on TF right now.
The ADTF is going to be everywhere in a couple of weeks. It's broken. It's too good.
I'm with it.
Yep.
I think TF in general is just good right now.
Yeah. So, let's talk about... We've only got 2 teams left, and they're the teams that have barely played any games. They're Cincinnati Fear and AoE. So let's give, like, the best vibes we can about these 2 teams. Let's chat about Fear a little bit first. Like, I think Fear is really good. Like, I think they're...
Yeah.
I've been very impressed with how Toasty has looked so far.
Mm-hmm.
I've been pretty happy. I've been very impressed with Lens. Last week, I think it was really Lens's time to shine a little bit more in the series up against Lit. I think his Lucian was super good there. They only lost to Fly Challengers, and even they were able to take them to 3 games. Again, that was the Surdy Flu series, so who's to say? But I don't know if he had the flu. I don't know what he said. We're doing the Michael Jordan reference. But
But it was also one of the closest FLYC games
It was. It
like they've
was.
played.
Yeah, and it's like the takeaways from that have been bizarre. Is Cincinnati Fear so good? They're the only team that can challenge FlyQuest because they almost won that first game in that series too.
Yeah.
Like that, when it came down to they were like pushing the Nexus and they couldn't finish it. So it's like, is Cincinnati Fear so good they could almost beat Fly Challengers, or is Fly Challengers absolutely unbeatable because the only time they come close to losing is when one of their best players is sick? I don't know. I don't know what to take away from that. Um, but yeah, I mean, Fear stood out to me. I think Fear will end up being pretty good. I think they will finish top half.
Yep. Like I want to add on from what I said before because we're talking about Lead being Slayer's favorite team. To me, Fear is my favorite team. Like I've loved watching them play so far this split. It's enjoyable. They have a lot of action. They don't shy away from fighting, and they also are smart in their approach in certain aspects, which it's not surprising with a team having someone like Philip and then also Chad that even though he was on the OQ's last split, he's still an LC close to LCS and NACL level jungler. So the fact that they've been able to accumulate so much power from the get go, and I've also loved the fact that they played or they formed their team around trying to develop Toasty according. Because I feel like they've given so much room for Toasty to be as free as possible. And that's a great thing to have for a rookie. Like, by the way, I love the way that the rookies have started in the NACL, but they've opened up so many space or so much space for Toasty to be Toasty. And it's thanks to the fact that they not only have a really good rock in the top lane like Philip, and Chad being a really good enabler in the jungle position, not necessarily playing supportive, but more so just making it easier for Toasty to be able to just be really free, but also because they have Lance on the back. And I think he's one of the AD carries that went the most, not unnoticed, but underappreciated in the previous splits, especially with Wildcard, when Wildcard was trying to put a fight against the top teams. It was one of the most underappreciated parts around that roster. So I feel like the idea of trying to make Toast to be as free as possible is really working out for Fear, and it's going to develop even better. I feel like this team is destined to crash and burn, though, just because like it's not going to be the rose tinted glasses all the way. But the idea that they had around Toasty is really good, and I feel like the longer it goes, probably for next split is going to be great for the team.
Yeah, I think they're the perfect example of the younger guys playing at their best right now. Because I don't know if this is age wise correct, but we've known Philip for a while. People who have been around the scene for a minute know Daption, who he's just been a vet for a lot of ADs right now. I think that's partly. I think he's doing a good job with Lens, propping him up. So, but yeah, I go back to the point where with like Chad and Toasty are probably they're probably arguably the two brightest spots on this team right now. So it's fun. Also, their content's also fun. Lit isn't my favorite. I just want to say they have the best content piece. But I laugh every time they throw up the Cincy Fear roster, and it's all of them in they're wearing the Grim Reaper look. They're like the Grim Reaper costume. they're just like doing random silly things. I don't know if anyone caught that. Also, weird total tangent, but am I the only one that didn't see when they put Crimson on as a sub? Crimson is listed as a sub top laner on their team
Wait,
right now
really?
on Lil Fandom. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that
intriguing.
as well. I don't
didn't
know
know,
when they
actually.
did that, but I guess they did at some point. Crimson was playing. Wait, was Crimson playing? Crimson was playing in OQs, wasn't he?
He was playing for CCG, which is the weirder part too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was, or yeah, he was. I was like, I literally commentated over
That's
him
a
playing.
random
He's
one,
definitely.
but interesting.
I mean, it must have gotten added once CCG dropped out of OQs because they're. Oh no, there's yeah. Maybe it happened right after they lost to Winthrop. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess I could check because they have logs. I don't know. I'll figure it out in a second.
Yeah. Well,
Or-
that aside,
or I won't. Oh yeah, January 11th. No, so CCG was still very much alive in the OQs. That's weird.
interesting. I mean, it could also just be like somebody just not updating fandom on time, or maybe the rules around that have changed. Who's really to say? Regardless, yeah, no. I mean, high hopes for Cincinnati Fear. Let's get to AoE to round things out. I mean, I don't know what to make of AoE. Like, I was so
Yeah.
happy to see them take down Team Liquid when they played them last week, and then they came in and they lost to Mirage, the first team to have done so. Uh, so I don't know. I just don't know what to say. I think Wixie looks great, but they've just felt so inconsistent. It feels like from top to bottom, right? I mean, even in
Yeah.
their week 1 series where they came in against Maryville, the bot lane looked really rough. Although Maryville, now we know, has actually a quite very competitive bot lane, so that doesn't look quite as bad in hindsight. But then, like, they've just been so consistent everywhere, inconsistent everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like AoE reminds me of GGS from last year, from spring, where like the idea of the team, the players, I can see them being up higher up, but they are just so inconsistent that I just don't know what to expect. Like I can see them beating FLYC one day and then losing to Lit, just cause. So it's just a weird situation to try and put them in. I feel like Wixie is probably one of the brighter spots in Team Roastern. So I think Roastern is probably their best player. Wixie has been ramping up better, and Onat feels like the more consistent one. Samudo, uh, and then just trying to see what they are going to be able to accomplish. I think they are going to go to playoffs, but it's more so what they will do if they get to playoffs. What I'm looking out for the team.
See, I am I'm not 100% on this take yet because, like Gordo said about 1,800 times, they haven't played enough games. So maybe I'll circle back to this entire conversation after they play 2 games, because I think we'll have a better idea of Fear and AoE after this week because they both played 2 matches. So, and they're also both playing 2 matches against teams where like, or at least with AoE, it's like they're gonna play Lit, who is like down here, and then they're gonna play Supernova. So we'll get like a good range, I feel, on AoE. But I mean, it's Rose Thorn and Onat again. Last split, I had questions on Team Fish Taco. Obviously, they had a lot of top lane issues that like were plaguing them, but I can't help but feel like it's a similar boat where that jungle mid duo is just kind of disappointing for me. Where I thought they'd be better and a big part of the team. I kind of feel like they're the ones faltering. I think Wixie and Breezy are. I think Wixie and Breezy have been the best part of that team. So that where does that leave? Someone has to be disappointing with them losing to Mirage.
100%. That was not unacceptable, but at the same time, like you don't want to be the first team to give the team that loses to everyone their first win. So
and they lost
probably
hard.
could affect morale. Yeah, it could affect morale a bit. I'm not sure how streaky they are. Maybe Samudo is, or Onat as well. Could impact that sort of playstyle going forward.
Yeah, I mean, like Zamudo is the one that I think I come away from most kind of disappointed with, in that he just still feels like so inconsistent and flippy, and it's like I just feel like you can't be like that in this environment of top lane right now. Not just the meta, but like how good North American top lane is. Like that Bradley is in the hyperbolic time chamber right now. He's gonna come out and probably be really good when he gets back from Korea. He's gonna be contending for a spot. Denethor is on his way up. He will be here in the summer. I'm still pretty confident in that. Yujin is a name. It is a name I was going to say people should start getting to know. There's some stuff going on in the background as we record that maybe you don't need to know Yujin actually.
Yeah.
But he has looked absolutely great. So I mean, like, there's just a lot of top laners in the North American ecosystem right now that you just have to be paying your respects towards. And I worry about Zamudo's future here if he can't like find a way to find some consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we said streakiness a lot with teams. I think I figured out the root problem. I just think a lot of these players on AoE are are very streaky. I just think their top side as a whole are all streaky players, which we've unfortunately figured out.
It's just scary to think what could happen to them if they begin to go on a losing streak.
Yeah.
Agreed. So,
But like I said, with Fear and AoE, I'm gonna hold a lot of my judgment especially AoE, until we get through this week, because
Yeah.
well, that's why
just need more games.
First game of week 5 is going to be Lit versus AoE. That's going to be a really interesting one. I think that defines a lot of like what these two teams are going to look like for the back half of the season, right? Whoever wins this, I think, is well set up to like stabilize and be comfortable in the middle of the table. And whoever loses it may very well be doomed to kind of dip down pretty low there, like Lit, because they're going to have that tough back end of their schedule. And so, like AoE is one of those teams that, like, if you're hoping for like a middle of the pack Lit, you're probably not going to be FlyQuest, you're not going to be Maryville, like those you probably shouldn't be predicting to win. So you need to be winning your matches like this up against AoE to like really solidify yourself middle of the table. And likewise on the other side, AoE, one of those matches that you would expect to be able to win if you are a middle of the table team is up against Lit. So if you can't take it here, then it's like, well, now you've lost to Mirage and you've lost to Lit. So it's like, who are you going to beat? Who are you actually anticipating that you're going to be able to take the games off of to avoid dropping down? Wild card, okay, maybe that's one, but it's not going to be enough to bail you out, and even that's not guaranteed.
Yeah. I just need more games. I just need more games out of some of these teams.
It's so hard to even talk about these last two with how little we've seen. So, looking forward to getting to see them a little bit more this weekend, as you guys should as well. NACL is going to be on at the LCS times this weekend, so starting at 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific, however else time works. So definitely be sure to check those out. And we will be back next week to have some more discussions about the game. So thank you, everybody, for tuning on in. Have yourselves a great night. We'll see you next time.